Hello, and welcome to a live pop culture on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. I'm here with my co-host, Mystery Chris, Mr. E. Chris.
Yes,
How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad that we're here tonight to take people's minds off of the death and destruction happening in the Middle East right now by talking about all the death and destruction caused by serial killers. You're welcome,
Yes,
everyone.
it
It's
is.
gonna be a good one.
It is going to be a good one, and we're here with our special guest for tonight, Tracy Barkley from Keto and Crime. How are you, Tracy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm always excited to see your background whenever you join us because you celebrate each holiday with a tree. Is that a Halloween tree?
It is. It is. It's got candy corn and pumpkins and a skeleton, and then I've got all kinds of spiders and stuff back here.
I love the fact that you do a tree year round. And we were just saying before we started, all three of us like candy corn.
Yeah.
Do
We're
you
in
like
the
candy corn on pizza?
No, I don't.
gross.
I don't like it
I don't know.
heated.
I don't know.
But
I mean, if people eat pineapple on pizza, then somebody in the world eats candy corn on pizza.
I do microwave peeps, not because I want to eat them, but just because I like the reaction. They blow up. I mean, they're fun. I don't eat it, but
Have you guys tried? I don't know if this is a new
a
thing,
lot.
but have you tried this freeze dried candy? I just tried some freeze dried candy for the first time.
That sounds gross.
It's
No.
actually, it makes it blow up. And so, like, if you're eating a peppermint, for example, like a red and white peppermint, it gets like this big. And it's just very airy, and they
Mm.
had other kinds of freeze-dried candy. They're like Laffy Taffy, and I wonder what a peep would do. It'd probably get very big when you
Yeah.
freeze dry it.
Does it taste
I
like
had
cotton candy?
No, it tastes like whatever the candy originally was, just very airy.
Mm-hmm.
I had at the Space and Rocket Center, I had freeze dried ice cream. It's what they give to the astronauts. It's freeze dried. It puffs up. It's really big like that, and it's Neapolitan. So they had the three flavors, which is still
Mhm.
one of my favorite ice cream flavors ever. And it was in a plastic wrap, and you just unwrap it and eat it. It's so weird.
It's kind of, I've had that before when I was a kid. It's kind of like that. It's
Yeah.
kind of tastes like that, or the texture of the astronaut ice cream. Well, before we get started, let me just wish a happy birthday to Kevin Anderson.
Yay!
He's now old
Yay!
enough to move into his dad's active living community. Yay! Happy birthday. Yesterday was my birthday. I had a great birthday. I hope you're having a great one, Kevin. Thanks for hanging out with us. And hello to everyone in the chat. This is the second of our spooky October Halloween month pop culture episodes. And for tonight, we picked Mystery Chris actually picked this topic, although it's one of my favorite topics. You picked the topic of true crime. And I think we've bitten off a little more than we can chew. And because when I started compiling everything I wanted to talk about, I was like, this is going to be 10 hours.
I know. I saw that. I was like, dang, she went in hard.
And that's not even the half of it. So we'll see how much we get through tonight. I have a feeling we might have to do a follow-up episode, but we'll just see. We'll just see how we do. And then we have, of course, I was very excited to I heard from Tracy today, and I was like, wow, I'm meant to have you on the show tonight because you do a true crime show, and you just randomly reached out to me today about something, and I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. And so I'm very happy to have you because you looked over our list and you said you've covered every case that I had on the list except for one.
Correct.
So where should we start, Mr. Chris? Should we start with
Wow, I have no idea.
well,
um,
first of
let's
all,
just do a general. I mean, first, just talking about the popularity of true crime and why we think it's gotten so big.
yeah, first of all, I a big true crime reader, viewer. I've mentioned that before. Obviously, Tracy is. She has a whole show called Keto and Crime about true crime. What about you, Mystery Chris? Do you watch a lot of it, or do you read a lot of it?
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of it. I think I mostly watch Dateline because I like how Dateline presents it as a mystery. And I know that's a little bit deceptive in the editing because sometimes they'll make it seem like a certain suspect was considered to be more important of a suspect than they actually were by the police. And so they create red herrings, just like in a murder mystery movie. So I like those the best. But I've watched some of the other ones in the past.
I think I'm just going to make a educated guess here. I think Tracy and I are probably a little more into true crime than you, though, even though you're into it. Would you say that's probably accurate?
Most definitely.
So that is in keeping with what some of the studies and statistics say. Before we even started tonight, I saw a comment from Nomo who said his wife is really into true crime. And I told him, well, she's not alone, because if you look at the statistics, women on average read and watch more true crime than men. And actually, I've got an article here about a study. We can just start here, maybe. This is from BBC Science Focus. And the headline is, "Why are we so obsessed with true crime?" And if we scroll down, they just kind of line it up for us. Crime stories seem to be more popular than ever. Bookshop shelves and TV schedules are heaving with murder mysteries and whodunits. And the true crime genre has been given a new lease on life in recent years with smash hit documentaries such as Making a Murderer, The Jinx, and The Keepers. The podcast Serial, season 1 of which investigated a real-life murder, has also attracted hundreds of millions of downloads. And you can see the subject right there of the podcast, the very popular podcast Serial, Adnan Syed.
Mhm.
And I will say, we can talk about this when we get to his case, but it's interesting because all of this interest in and attention on true crime has actually, in some cases, helped solve cases, but it's also helped to overturn some convictions like his. I'm one of the people who's in the camp of this is not a good thing. I think he's absolutely guilty, and he's walking around free now, in part because of the popularity of the podcast.
Beware of any podcast or documentary that is trying to bring more truth to light or reversing an old decision. Beware of that, because 99% of the times they're full of shit. Pardon my French.
The woman who was responsible in large part for helping to get him freed. Now, she was interviewed on the Serial podcast, but that wasn't her podcast. She launched her separate podcast about him and dedicated it entirely to him and freeing him. She's now teamed up with some entertainment British woman. I don't know. They have a new podcast in which that is the subject, Tracy. They are trying to free people. They said they're going to tackle the Scott Peterson case next. They're probably already working on it in trying to get Scott Peterson freed. And I'm not a fan of that. So, but okay, moving on. Evolutionary psychologists say that we're drawn to these tales because murder, rape, and theft have played a significant part in human society since our hunter-gatherer days. It's in our nature to be highly attuned to criminal misdemeanors, and we instinctively want to discover the who, what, when, and where so we can find out what makes criminals tick and to better protect ourselves and our kin. So that they just offered us one possible explanation there of why people are so interested in it. They're saying it's a survival mechanism, and so we can learn more to protect ourselves. What do you think about that answer?
I agree, but I also think that people and men and women are into it because it relieves a little bit of our fears of getting murdered, because most of the time with these shows, especially with the Dateline type shows, the murderer tends to be somebody that the victim knows. And I believe in actual life statistics, I believe, show that most murder victims know the person that murdered them. I'm pretty sure that's accurate, but I think a lot of people see this stuff and think, oh, well, if I can spot the signs of craziness in people, then all I have to do to avoid being murdered is not to marry a crazy person or befriend a crazy person or get around these crazy people showing these type of signs. And so when you have these shows that have these nice little endings where the murderer gets caught and turns out to be someone that they know, I think a lot of people see this and are a little bit more relieved about their fears of getting murdered.
What do you think, Tracy?
I agree with that. I think for a lot of people that is a motivation. And then for me, I'm more interested in the mystery of it, the forensics, the psychology, how they're solved. And I'm also interested in the psychology of the murderer and what brings them to that level of crime. It's more of a whodunit for me. I'm not in now, even though if you look at my channel, I'm half true crime, half horror movies. I love a good horror film, a good slasher, as long as I know it's fake. I'm not one of the podcasters that you'll hear that literally almost appear to get off on the gruesome details of a crime scene. I will skip that, unless I have to investigate it just for understanding the crime. But I'm more interested in what made the murderer the way that they were. That's my fascination with it.
That's also, you've just articulated what's part of I think my fascination with it as well. Yes, this answer they're giving here about like how to protect yourself, that's a part of it. You want to understand what things to watch out for. Absolutely. How to spot red flags, that's a part of it. Learning different things about, for example, there was one true crime case. I'm blanking on this one. I didn't prepare this one, but it was you might know it, Tracy. This was this group of 2 men and 2 women who were held up. They were in their home. These 2 home invaders came in and demanded money of them, and then took turns taking the men to the ATM, to the bank, to get money. And while they were doing that, the one who stayed behind at the house would tie all the victims up in the closet and take out the women one at a time, raping them.
Yeah, I remember that case. I don't remember the name of the case, but I believe that is one of the cases that inspired the horror movie The Strangers.
Wow, probably, because it was one of those home invasion.
Yeah.
Yes. And in that case, one of the women survived. They ended up taking all 4 of them out into the snow and executed them on the side of the road. But one of the women survived. The bullet deflected off of her hair clip. And so she dragged herself. She had been stripped down, dragged herself naked through the snow to some house and found help. And she ended up testifying against them. They were convicted. And one of the things she said in her testimony was about how even though the attacker had put the gun down beside her while he was raping her, she didn't try to get the gun or do anything because she didn't know anything about guns. And she was too afraid to try even. And that's an example of, I think, where a true crime story, if the right person hears that, they might be motivated to, hey, look, I want to learn about guns and demystify them in case I'm ever in a bad situation. At least I don't have the fear of the gun. Like, at least I can make that choice of whether or not to try to do something without a lack of technical know-how being the thing that prevents me, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one reason. Go ahead.
Yeah. And that sounds very similar to the Slender Man murders, the 2 girls that tried to kill the other 2. And she actually faked being dead. And when they left, she crawled. They were in a park, and she crawled to the bike path and was able to flag down a biker who was coming by, and that's how she got help. And she was 12 or 13 at the time.
Yeah. You know what? Let me make a note, because I know the Slender Man murders, and I didn't even put them on here, but I definitely would like to cover them in a little bit. Well, the other reason I think I'm fascinated by it is what you said in the second part of your answer, which is that I'm not as interested in the forensics part. That part does interest me a little bit. Like if you watch something like Cold Case Files or Forensic Files, which document actual cases, or American Justice, those kind of shows, I am interested in that a little bit. And I do want to see, there's something satisfying about seeing about a true crime case from beginning to end and seeing that the bad guy got caught and is in prison. That makes you feel satisfied. But I think I'm more, the big driving thing for me in watching true crime is I want to understand the nature of evil. I want to understand the psychology of these people. Like you said, that what makes a person do something like this, what drives it. And I think a lot of women probably since it tends to be more women than men who watch true crime, I think that might also be one of the driving forces, because women on average, if you use surveys, they self-report they're more interested in people. They're more interested in working with people, understanding people than men are. And so I think it's part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about finding out what brought the killer to that point in their life. Was it nature? Was it nurture? Was it both? Was it, and then just how they arrived at, and then of course how the case was solved. Those are the most important things to me.
Yes.
I could do without the crime scene photos and all of that, honestly.
So scrolling down, I'm going to read a little bit more about the study, and I have the study pulled up too if we want to look at it. But so it says a 2010 study at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign found that women tend to be drawn towards true crime stories more than men. So it's not just something we've noticed anecdotally among our friends. The data shows it's true that more women watch and read true crime, and that women are most interested in stories that give insight into the killer's motives and that contain information about how victims escaped and that feature female victims. So this fits with the evolutionary idea that people are instinctively drawn towards stories where they can identify with the victim and read about tips and strategies for defeating the baddies.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a short article about that study.
Yeah, I can agree with most of that. Absolutely.
Here's one more.
I don't think I'm more drawn to cases where the victim is female, though. I mean, an interesting case is an interesting case, but I think crimes that it's probably more of a correlation factor. I think crimes that involve women get more attention than crimes that involve men most of the time. And so I think it may seem that way, if that makes sense.
I think so. Plus, I think a lot of times, at least the cases that become the biggest in terms of media attention and our cultural consciousness, like what we pay attention to and learn about, and certainly on the thumbnail for today's episode, a lot of the serial killers, they tend to target women. Not always, but they tend to target women. And so more often than not, you're seeing that the victims in these high profile cases are women.
Yep. Now, I'll tell you, when it comes to the perpetrators, I'm much more interested if the perpetrator is female. That's probably why I'm more into, like, if you're talking about TV shows about true crime, I'm more into like Snapped than any other show, because it's usually women that are, and that psychology just interests me.
I also go ahead.
I think I'm interested in psychology of kid killers, because trying to understand how a child could get to that point, to me seems even more interesting than trying to figure out why an adult and how they got to that point. Because I was watching some true crime stuff before the show, and there was one that's talking about a little girl who she was sexually abused by her biological father, and her adoptive parents, when they adopted her, noticed that she was very distant. She was becoming more violent. She threatened to kill them and kill her little brother. And, she was doing all these sexual stuff to her brother too, just really messed up stuff. And they ended up putting it in a program that helps kids, which I didn't even know this existed, but there was a program that helps kids who deal with these type of abuses that have these thoughts of wanting to hurt, kill other people and animals and things like that. And she was ultimately able to improve her psychology, and so now she's a well-adjusted person. But still,
you're talking about Child of Rage, aren't you? Beth Thomas?
Is that her name? I think, because there was another one. I was watching another girl who got adopted by some parents from Russia. She was from Russia and her parents were American, and the parents said that she tried to kill her little brother and was very violent. So they ended up taking her back to Russia and dropping her off to like some orphanage. And when you watch the whole show, it's a little bit more ambiguous. It almost seems like maybe the parents, for whatever reason, didn't quite want her anymore. They didn't quite understand her and didn't want her, but maybe she wasn't as violent as what they were saying. And so it's very sad, but still I was just shocked to see that there was another story of an adoptive child who may or may not have violent tendencies. It's just, I'm thinking, how often does this happen? Probably quite a bit.
I've done a whole playlist on killer kids. A lot of Canadians add them for some reason. A lot of Canadian kid killers, but lots of, I mean, most of those stories are the cases that I covered. I think in a lot of those, it's more nature. I think they're just born with some defect.
Really? Because
Sociopaths. Now, I'm not psychopaths, sociopaths. I'm not saying that nurture does not play into it. Of course it does. But I think, especially the ones that kill before the age of, let's say, 13 or 14, there's something wrong with them innately. That is just my opinion. I could be totally wrong, but from all the deep dives I've done, it just seems that there was a pattern of abusing animals, abusing younger siblings, abusing other children from the start. And so there's something wrong.
Well, that's interesting because that's the opposite of what I want to see your series now because, Mr. Chris, that first case you were describing, that was definitely Beth Thomas. She's not the one that was taken back to Russia. She's the one that they put in a program, and she is now herself helps children with these who have these problems. She was the subject of a documentary and I think also a movie, Child of Rage. If anybody wants to look up Child of Rage, 1990 HBO documentary. And she was, before she was adopted, was subjected, they think, to sexual abuse. And so the reason I mention that is because a lot of times I've heard that the kids who show psychopathic tendencies, there's something in nurture. So it's the opposite of what you're saying, Tracy, although I'm fascinated by the ones where that's not the case, where there's just something wrong with them, and that there's nothing they can point to in their childhood. That was the case for Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy said there was nothing in his childhood.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, and both of y'all's opinion, like
Dahmer, there was really nothing. I mean, he had a fascination with death, but his dad did too. His dad was, loved science, and so that was their thing, picking up roadkill and dissecting it. So there was something in him, and I'm not saying that nurture cannot overcome nature. Of course it can. But most of the cases that I looked into, and I looked into some lesser known cases, to me, and I said it's my opinion, that a lot of them were flawed from the beginning. And I hate to say that, but they had something in them that drove them to kill.
Interesting. I think it's probably in my opinion, I think it's probably a little of both. There's something maybe wrong with them, but they have to grow up in the wrong type of nurturing environment to trigger it. And it doesn't mean that everybody, like in Dahmer's case, as you said, there wasn't anything especially egregious, except it does stand out to me that the way it was described, his mom was nuts, and they fought. His mom and dad fought all the time, and his mom was overbearing. And if I had to make a judgment call based on the reports about her, she probably had a personality disorder herself. And so it doesn't mean everybody who has a mom or dad with a personality disorder is going to become a Dahmer. There was something else probably wrong with him. You're right, from birth.
Jim Jones, I know it's, but he's a mass murderer, in my opinion. He killed 1,000 people or convinced them to commit suicide. I did a 4-hour deep dive on him. And so, I mean, he grew up with a single, and a semi-abusive father. His father was a drunk, but he had these religious visions and stuff from childhood, and it drove him to be a religious zealot. And then later on, he actually became an atheist. He was an atheist and transferred that love of religion into socialism and became like an avid socialist. And that's how he got all of his followers. I mean, he was masquerading as a preacher at that point, but all of those tendencies were there from a very young age.
Yeah. A lot of these serial killers, not a lot maybe, but several of them were involved in politics. And I think for some of them that was part of their mask. It was, and it was part of it. Like,
Well, I know a lot of politicians
A
are
lot of
psychopaths.
politicians, a
Yes.
lot of CEOs have
yes,
Yeah.
psychopathic and sociopathic. Look at it. I mean, American Psycho. That's a perfect, even though it's fictional, it's
You
perfect
mean Gavin
demonstration.
Newsom? Yeah.
Gavin
Yeah,
Newsom. Yeah. Well,
and
I
that's
mean,
just a psychopath that went in a more productive way, to the
well,
eye at least.
well, as someone said in the chat, Bundy was involved in Republican politics. He was. John Wayne Gacy was heavily involved in the politics of the
Democrat.
Democrat Party
Mhm.
and had served on, I don't know, several local committees. He was heavily involved in the Democratic Party. Jim Jones, who you mentioned, like there were a lot who ran in
He
political
was heavily in the
circles.
Democratic Party of California, Jim Jones.
Yeah.
So do you think a lot of people, particularly women watching or listening to true crime stuff, do you think it's actually translated to them being able to identify sociopaths and psychopaths more easily or not? Because I was just thinking about my example I threw out with Gavin Newsom. Like a lot of people are saying that if Democrats decide to go with him, that he might have a good chance of winning, particularly because, you know, a lot of women find him attractive. But when I see
Oh,
him, regardless what he looks like, he's
Find
clearly
him creepy.
crazy. There's clearly something wrong, something creepy. Like, even if I can't specifically
Literally,
identify
I see American Psycho.
yeah.
That's who
yeah.
So
I
I
see.
just wonder, like, shouldn't there be more people that recognize that in a number of politicians? But like, if you were to ask, you know, a bunch of people who's a psychopath, like they'll just probably say the top people, whatever party they don't like. So they'll say, oh, you know, Trump, he's a psychopath, or you know, Hillary Clinton.
He's an
Whatever.
egomaniac, but he's not evil. Trump.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't know if people's skills have really increased after watching these shows in terms of identifying psychopaths.
I think, I mean, well, mine have. So, I mean, I look at Gavin Newsom and he sets off all of my alarm bells, and so does Hillary Clinton. And
Yeah.
I mean, there are several that I look at now, and I'm like, wow. I think because of watching true crime and specifically watching some of the police interrogations and some of the video interviews, which I've queued up some that I think are great examples of watching how these people fake human emotion. They fake laughter, they fake tears, they express the wrong emotion at the wrong time because they're acting and they don't know that it's not normal. And I think a lot of the politicians do the same thing. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but that's why people talk about Kamala Harris's cackle, her laugh, giving them the heebie-jeebies, and I'm like, it should give you the heebie-jeebies because it's fake. It's like
She's
a
killed and skinned a cat.
yeah.
I guarantee you. I guarantee you.
Yes, it's creepy. She's killed and skinned a cat. I thought that you meant that's what her laugh sounds like, a killed cat.
No. I believe she has murdered small animals at some point in her life.
That's just Tracy's opinion, guys.
That's my opinion. Please, if you're going to strike a channel, come over and strike my channel.
I thought it was a euphemism for sleeping with Willie Brown, but I guess not.
Oh.
Ugh.
Hey, so let me read a little bit more about the study and then we'll move on past this. So this is another article about the same study, and this is the headline is "Women More Than Men Choose True Crime Over Other Violent Nonfiction." And it says, when it comes to violent nonfiction, men are from Mars, the planet of war, but women are from Earth, the planet of serial killings and random murders. A new study found that when given a choice of violent reading material, now they're specifically asking the people in the survey about what kind of violent reading material. So this assumes you read violent material anyway. Women overwhelmingly opted to read true stories about the death and dismemberment of victims, much like themselves. Men, however, were more likely to choose nonfiction books about war or gang violence than those in the true crime genre. And I want to say, anecdotally, this is backed up in my marriage. It's like my husband at night, he'll be reading a book about Napoleon. I'm like, what's Napoleon up to? You know, he's like reading about war and history and violence, but in history. And then I'll be reading about, you know, a new documentary about Ted Bundy just came out, and he's like, okay, what's Ted Bundy up to? Like,
Same for me. I've been doing a series on the Third Reich on my channel, and even though, I mean, they're murders, and I'm fascinated by the whole psychology of everybody in that inner circle and how that they duped the entire country of Germany. You know, I'm just fascinated by that.
Here, let me scroll down just a little, Tracy. They're telling you a little bit about how they did the survey. The research began with an analysis of reviews posted on the website at Amazon.com by readers of books in the true crime and war genres. Coding usernames for gender, the researchers found that women wrote 70% of the reviews of books about true crime, while men wrote 82% of the reviews of books on war. It's a huge gender split there. The gender of the author appeared to play no role in women's preference for true crime books, meaning they didn't care if the author was a man or woman. The second study gave participants summaries of 2 books and asked them to choose the book they'd rather read. One summary was a so-called true account of the murder of 2 women in Hawaii. It was paired with either a true story of 2 female soldiers who died in a Gulf War Army unit or a true account of 2 family members of a Los Angeles gang who were killed. Women overwhelmingly chose the true crime books over the books about war or gang violence, even when the main characters of all the books were female. The men chose the true crime books about half the time when the other book was a true war story, and both books had female main characters. Let me scroll down just this part. Quote, research that has been done in the past about gender and aggression has established pretty clearly that men are more likely to commit violent crimes and they're more likely to be the victims of violent crimes, Fraley said. So these basic observations are extremely surprising to us. Is he not married? Why are women more drawn to the true crime genre than men?
I think it's just because of our interest. I'll give you an interesting stat. I do white collar crime as well because I'm fascinated by scams and white collar crime. But I pay attention to my analytics, and women, my viewership on my murder true crime cases are 90% female.
Wow.
On my white collar, it's 90% men.
Wow.
Men really enjoy white collar crime.
I don't care anything about white collar crime.
I love white collar crime, and it's a nice break. No one died, and it's a nice break from murder and mayhem.
That's so interesting, but that is exactly what I would expect. It's funny that researcher sounds surprised. What? Why would you're surprised? Okay. So the obsession with true crime has exploded to such a degree that we were just doing a quick, off the top of our head, a tally of different kinds of shows. And actually, when I looked at your original list, Mystery Chris, I told my husband I got offended as a true crime viewer because I was like, he's putting docuseries true crime together with dramatized true crime and also fake crime that's not real, that's just drama. And I had to separate them into 3 categories.
It's all the same.
And it's so funny. He was like, yeah, that's like when people tell me they love jazz and then they talk about Kenny G and I'm like, oh no. That's a joke because you had shows in there like CSI. And I was like, no, we're not even going to waste time on CSI because CSI Miami, I did used to watch some of those. But as someone who's interested in true crime, I don't consider those shows true crime. They're dramatization.
It's not true, obviously, but it's
not true.
I mean, the stories revolve about people getting murdered.
They're what would you call them, Tracy? They're like they're drama.
They're crime drama series.
Crime drama series, but not about real crime.
I put them I put them with like Hill Street Blues, which I grew up watching. Barney Miller, which I also grew up watching. Barnaby Jones. They're just detective shows, law enforcement shows.
Enforcement shows. So stuff like CSI, Glass Onion, Matlock, Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So let's take those out of the equation because I don't want to waste time on them. I'm such a snob. So that leaves 2 categories: true crime docuseries or documentaries, films or podcasts, or true crime dramatized, where they take a real life story and then they have actors portray the people and they make a movie or a series about it. And I watch both of these.
Yeah, those are my favorites. I love docuseries, documentaries, and then the the snaps, the crime, the unsolved mysteries. The Wives with Knives is one of my favorites, and they only got like 2 seasons of that.
I never even heard of that one.
Oh, it's fun. I'll send you a link.
So, because this has become so popular, there's a link that you put in here, Mr. Chris, that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if people know this, but I became aware of this a couple years ago because they were holding it in Austin, and I wanted to go, and I didn't get to because there was something else happening at the same time. But there is a crime convention for fans of true crime. You can go to
Nashville this next year.
Where is it next year?
Here in Nashville.
Oh, Nashville. Are you going?
Not for $350 tickets.
What?
I put myself down. Hopefully, I've applied to be on their podcast row. Mm-hmm. They accept creators of all sizes, so I'll get in free if I get that. And I've also applied to be a volunteer, so I'll get in free if I choose that. But I can't pay $350 to go.
That's incredible. I had no idea tickets are that expensive.
Oh, the VIPs are $1,600.
What?
You gotta really love true crime.
Yeah. Things. I mean, they have people like, the father in the John Ramsey. I mean, they have speakers like that there. Yeah. I mean, this is like,
the one in Austin had the one in Austin had Chris Hansen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to include the Catch a Predator stuff, but that had nothing to do with true crime. I just missed that show.
This is incredible. So look at here on their website. They are advertising the new Crime Con, the one that's going to be in Nashville that you just mentioned, May and June. But then also, look at this. They just had a crime cruise. That's all women.
Murder mystery boat.
But how many men do you think took that crime cruise? I think this was probably more women even than the New Kids on the Block cruise.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
That's a thing too.
5% men, and those men were either gay or they were men that would never get laid again unless they didn't go with their wives or girlfriends. They fall in those two distinct camps. And for anybody that doesn't know, I'm gay. I can make gay jokes.
You have the card.
I have the card.
I want to know if anybody cosplays to this crime convention.
Dear God, I hope not. If I get in a crime con and I see people cosplaying as Jeffrey Dahmer, I'm turning around and walking out the door. I like true crime, but I don't like true crime.
But somebody does that. What a
yes.
I hadn't even thought of that. People do that. The other, it's making me think about cruises now since they had a crime cruise. The other cruise that I know that friends have gone on, I know people who've gone on the New Kids on the Block cruises every time they do one, and it's all women. And I guarantee you the crime con is all women. And also I know people who've gone on the Golden Girls cruise, all women.
I swear there must be a cruise for everything now. There's a Star Trek cruise.
The Star Trek cruise is probably more men.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably.
I didn't get into Star Wars until The Next Generation. I never got into the original series or any of the other since.
Star Trek, you mean?
Yeah, Star Trek.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine is great. I recommend watching Deep Space Nine.
So, I know that you've put in, because you said you watched Dateline, Mr. Chris. Should we watch this commercial?
You don't have to watch the commercial. I just put the commercial in there because it was a commercial from like the first season of Dateline, because I didn't realize it had been on since 1992, and it first started out kind of a general news program where they just covered different types of topics, and the true crime segment ones became really popular, and they ultimately went with that. So it's kind of like Maury Povich. You remember like Maury Povich used to cover a bunch of different things, but then the Not the Father type episodes are the ones that were the most popular.
48 Hours
show
was just that way.
Yeah.
As well. It started out as general news, and then the true crime kind of took over.
Yeah. Yeah, and so many other ones, like 2020 started doing it, and tons of other ones.
Here, let's watch it though. Since you put it in here, I'm curious. 1993. Here's a promo.
Tuesday, they were stranded for days, facing cold, hunger, and fear. With his wife and baby huddled in a cave, he walked for days in search of help.
I was just hoping and praying that he would make it.
Now, for the first time, we'll take you back there to hear their story of survival. I'm Stone Phillips.
And I'm Jane Pauley. Join us for Dateline NBC Tuesday.
I love watching old commercials.
I
don't.
know. Back when things were simpler and people were less crazy.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start with, gosh, I'm trying to figure out which one of these we should start with. As you guys saw in the thumbnail, I had to stop because I was crowding so many murderers on the thumbnail art, and I ran out of space. I put these in one order, but I think I actually want to start with, I put the women down at the bottom, but let's start with the women. Can we start there? Because I think some of these
Ladies
are
first.
the most interesting in there, in some of the things that can be learned from them. So people are generally, I find, familiar with Susan Smith. If you're not, if you're young, she is a woman from South Carolina, my home state, who in the 90s murdered her 2 children, and she blamed it on a carjacker at the beginning, and she did a lot of video pleas and newscast press conferences, acting and begging for their safe return when it was her all along. But a lot of people are not familiar with, I've found, Diane Downs, who was very similar. And Diane Downs came before her and has been the subject of, not recently, I haven't seen any documentaries or anything on her, but she's been the subject of documentaries and a movie.
Yeah, Farrah Fawcett played her in a movie.
Thank you. I knew it's the Farrah Fawcett film. Do you remember what that one was called?
Sacrifice. God, it's it was Farrah Fawcett and
Small Sacrifices.
Small Sacrifices.
I saw that when I was
It's a TV movie.
Probably too young to see it. I feel like I should rewatch it now. Here, I've got an actual clip of one of her interviews. Let's pull this one up. Now, this is when she was still pretending. She took her 3 children, young children, to put them in the car, pulled over, and then shot and killed one of her kids and shot her other 2 kids, but they didn't die. She tried to kill all 3 of them. And then much like much like Susan Smith, who people are more familiar with, she went on the news and she said that a bushy-haired stranger had carjacked them and had shot at her children. And I think her interviews are a great place to start if you want to look at someone who you know now that they're lying, that they did something so evil and so horrible, and just watch the way that she acts. I think we'll have a lot to talk about here. Can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have been through that night so many times. I've even been through it with my psychologist. It's very hard. It's very tearful. There are a lot of memories that, I don't know. A lot of people, when something traumatic happens to them, they suppress it immediately. I kept those memories because I knew that I was the only person that was going to be able to tell them what happened when we got to the hospital. And when I got there, the first thing I said was call the doctors. Second thing was the blood type. Third thing was call the cops because they've got to find him. And so I had to remember as much as I could remember. When this man shot my daughter, my first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage.
Can we just for a second talk about this? That's insane that you're giving an interview, one of your kids has been killed, the other 2 have been shot supposedly by some stranger who pulled you guys over in the middle of the road. And you say your first thought when your child was murdered and right in front of you was about your childhood and something about you, and it just, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, her eyes are dead. There's no life in her eyes at all.
Yeah. She's very snake-like.
My entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had
her entrapment by society. She plays on the feminist thing a lot, by the way, how she's an oppressed victim.
And she's totally psychoanalyzing this man that just supposedly shot her children.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing a lot of analysis
Yeah.
At
She's
the
like,
point that her children have been shot.
I'm the victim here of society and men, just like in my childhood.
She did this over a man that didn't want to be with her because of her kids.
Same with
Just like
Susan
Susan
Smith.
Gun. He was in control and I was not. And there was nothing I could do. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth.
Did you see her smile there?
Her mouth. And
it's so creepy. I think the way she talks about this.
My entrapment by...
She does like a little smile when she's supposedly remembering this horrific, like the blood coming out of her child's mouth.
Society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. He was in control and I was not. And there was nothing I could do. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. And
I feel like she was about
what
to
do
laugh.
You do?
Like what?
Sounded like she was about to laugh.
They call this, I believe, Tracy, you can correct me if you disagree, but I think this is a good example of what they call duper's delight, where this person who's lying about something so awful is sort of, part of them is tickled that they're getting away with this and that you're believing them. And sometimes you see that manifest on their face really quickly in a weird way. Like they call it a duper's delight, this kind of smile at the wrong moment.
But there's this lack of self-awareness of her, because like she's describing something that's horrific and there's absolutely no emotion. It's like she's not even trying to fake an emotion, which is really surprising, because you would think she would know, oh, people expect me to be crying and sad and upset and uncontrollable. You think she would try to emulate that, to fake it at least, but she's not.
No.
Yeah, and she just, the thing that got her in trouble, well, the evidence, of course, but the fact that her story kept changing. The same with Susan Smith. Their stories kept changing and evolving, and the cops picked up on that right away.
You just stand there trapped. And then the gun kept firing and firing and firing. And it was monotonous. It just kept going. It was like a slow motion picture. And then he swung around towards me, and this is something that I did not recall when I was explaining to the cops, because it wasn't like a movie when I was telling them. I was telling them what happened, the important details. He shot my kids. I pushed him. I ran. And when he swung around, he was pointing. When he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips of my fingers. And that snapped me. And I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are going to die. And I'm not going to let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not take.
I'm going to back up just for a second, because I missed this one part where she talks about how she wasn't lucky, but her kids were. Wait a minute. I think it's coming up.
Take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful.
Isn't that weird? Like she's saying she kind of laughs, like, again, inappropriately when recounting this. She's misjudging, as a psychopath or sociopath, she's misjudging human. She's learned to mimic what comes naturally for other people in conversation, but she doesn't know when to use it. And so she's using it here when it's completely inappropriate. She's kind of laughing like, I wasn't lucky. I couldn't even tie my shoes for a month. Like, your kid died.
I have a steel plate on my arm. I will for 1.5 years. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I...
What?
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost Tracy. We did. Okay, we're gonna play a little more of this and wait for her to come back.
Sounds like a really bad creative writing project or some sort from a high school or something. Like someone who's trying to write this story and add all these details to it that make it seem colorful.
Yes, she's adding too many details. That's the other thing you notice in these interviews and these police interrogations with people who we now know are guilty. They add a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they add so many details because they think the more information they give you, the more it seems like the more they can convince you they're being truthful and honest because they're telling you all kinds of things, but none of it's consequential. None of it's important. It's a lot of added superfluous details that in the real heat of the moment, I don't think you would remember that you stopped and thought about the patriarchy and society beating you down, and you wouldn't recall that when your child is being killed in front of you. Somebody had a question. Kevin, did she shoot herself to cover up the crime? Yes, she shot herself in the arm.
So was it this woman or the other woman? The lady who drowned her kids. I think, was it Susan Smith? Is she the one who drowned her kids in the car?
Drowned them, yes.
Okay. So I was thinking, like, this is back in the day when white people were committing hoax hate crimes against blacks, but now it's like black people committing hoax hate crimes against white people. Things have shifted.
Yeah, this woman, from what I recall, and when she rejoins us, Tracy, she can tell us for sure, probably. I don't think she gave the race, and maybe she did when she changed her story, but at first she just called him a bushy-haired stranger. All she could see was the hair. Like, what? Nothing more
bone
specific.
Through his nose, and you're saying ooga ooga.
Right. Let's see. Are you back, Tracy?
I am. I'm sorry. Minor network difficulties. I apologize.
No worries. We had a question for you.
Yes.
So she just finished saying she's not lucky. She has all this pain and stuff from the gunshot to her arm, which she did herself. We later found out. But she said my kids were lucky. And then Mr. Chris was asking me about the details of the case. Did she all I remember from when I read a lot and watched a lot about this was that she called the perpetrator a bushy-haired stranger. Yeah. Did she ever end up saying the race of the supposed stranger like Susan Smith did?
No, she just said she had. Everybody assumed it was he was Caucasian because this was Oregon in the 80s. I mean, it was 99% Caucasian, so it was just assumed. She never said the race.
She could have said Clyde Drexler. That would have been believable.
Yeah.
He was Portland Trailblazer at the time.
Oh. Yeah. Rib Rascal with a little bit of levity as well to this dark subject. He said she tried to implicate Bob Ross. Bushy haired.
Well, Susan Smith implicated a black, but made up a phony black man.
She made him black, yes. I have another clip here where it's from the same interview, but I found it queued up here. Let me just switch over. Hold on.
Kind of looks like a discount Princess Diana.
She does. She also kind of looks like Jeffrey Marsh.
Yeah,
I think.
There's also a clip where she's described a detective is having to reenact the crime with a model of a car, and and she's just having way too much fun.
She's laughing. She's like really enjoying describing this happen. Yes, I remember. It's so inappropriate. Okay, watch her smile. Watch her micro expressions here. Davina, you're right. It's called a micro expression.
Real soft. So that sound stays in my mind. When I go to bed, I cry at night. Even now, I still cry. I dream about Cheryl. But at night, when I close my eyes, I can see Christy reaching her hand out to me while I'm driving, and the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most.
Diane just got
Did you see that smile?
It's like the Joker.
Yeah. It's this woman. It's just incredible. And like you said, there's so much footage with her, so many different interviews and things you could look at that I think, look, here's a red flag. Here, I'm going to show you where she talks about. So when she got arrested and she was in prison, she got pregnant again in prison. And obviously she must have had conjugal visits of some kind. And
Which shows that there's a lid for every pot, I suppose.
Here's where she's talking about why she got pregnant.
Use that diary as evidence in the case. Downs is now expecting another child. She says her pregnancy takes away the feelings of loneliness in prison.
I got pregnant because I miss Christy and I miss Danny and I miss Cheryl so much. I'm never going to see Cheryl on earth again. And you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy. And that's gone. They took it from me. But
again, I just have to point out what a narcissist. Like, none of this is about her daughter's life being taken and about her daughter. It's about what her daughter gave her, and they took it from her. They took what my daughter gives me, and I'm going to have another kid because they make me happy and they give me validation, essentially.
But children are so easy to conceive.
Obviously, everyone is curious who the father is, and I know you probably don't want to talk about that. Does the father know who he is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's why I won't talk about it, because he feels as privately about this child as I do.
What happened to this kid?
She was adopted. She was taken away at birth. She was put into the system in Oregon. She was adopted. And then later on, she found out who her biological mother was. She visited Diane once in prison. And then other than that, never had anything to do with. Of course, the two surviving children were actually adopted by the prosecuting attorney and his wife of the case.
Oh, wow.
And they never had anything to do with her ever again.
Here, now, I know you like old commercials and clips of TV shows as much as I do, Mystery Chris. Are you very familiar with this case? Is all this new for you to watch?
I wasn't familiar with her, no.
So this is her. She was on Oprah. And I just want to show you a clip of Oprah talking to her. And look how weird she is. The audience ends up laughing at her, I think, because it's so weird, her affect and manner, that they don't know what to do. Like, they're like, this is what? Just watch this.
I don't know, what is it? You were pregnant at trial. Why did you get pregnant again?
I was extremely lonely. I missed my kids desperately. I had just seen Christy on the 2nd of October. And
the laughter.
It's like opening a wound and pouring salt in. I was extremely lonely, beyond belief and beyond explanation. And on October 13th, I just went and got pregnant because I was so lonely. I love my children. I miss my children. And I know that sounds simplistic. It really does. And I have to admit that. And that's why I say there's so much more feeling inside than I can give in 2 minutes. My whole life.
Isn't that creepy?
Everybody, we watched that Kramer clip of him going on Letterman after he dropped the N-bombs at the comedy club, and the audience didn't know what to do because he kept saying like Afro-Americans, and they were just laughing. It was the most awkward thing.
It's so awkward. And even her eyes at the end there, she's like, it's just more than I can, I'm just full of God's joy and love. I just want to share it. Like, something's wrong with you. Oh, man. You see how we could fill 10 hours? Should we? What do you think?
Did a lot of interviews. Oh, geez.
She did a lot. Do you think we should show Tracy her with the car?
It's interesting. It's definitely the most egregious of her interviews, in my opinion. Now,
Okay,
this is before they arrested her. So,
And she was walking them through,
yeah, it
like,
was a reenactment. I don't know if it was her actual car that they had. I believe it might have been her actual car they had at the lab, and they were asking her to pretty much reenact what happened that night.
okay, let me see if I can find it. I didn't have this one queued up, but I remember I've seen this one. I'm just
And
gonna
Chris,
look
if
at,
you want to see a good movie, it's actually pretty factual. There's a few, they changed the children's names in it. I don't know why they did, but if you, the old 1984 or 87 movie, Small Sacrifices with Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal.
Okay, I'll check that out.
It's only 90 minutes, and I think you can find it on YouTube with no ads or anything.
Cool.
And another great Farrah Fawcett, The Burning Bed, but it's unrelated.
I always get the name. I almost said The Burning Bed when we were trying to remember. Okay, I think this might be part of it. Here we go. And somebody in the chat said it seems like she's enjoying this media attention. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
definitely
she
a narcissist.
is. Yes. Okay, here we go. Now I haven't looked to make sure this is what we're looking for, but it looks like it.
Like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my gas. Started the car and left the car.
Do you see her laughing there? Like, I just hit my cast. This is her before she was arrested, as you said, showing them what happened.
Get the forensics right.
I go like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my gas. Started the
First of
car.
all, she didn't hit her cast. She's
Car door
just
shut itself.
asking for attention.
She was giddy. She laughed. She cracked jokes. I mean, she's reenacting.
Good old Nancy Grace.
Nancy Grace.
And her helmet hair. Yeah.
What do you guys think of Nancy Grace? I actually like her.
I like her. Her fiance was killed in a murder, and she dedicated her life. She left corporate law and dedicated her life to fighting crime, and I admire her for that.
Yeah. Here.
Gruesome shootings of her 3 children. She doesn't seem at all upset.
This is worse than okay.
She'd hit her cast, then made the statement, "This is worse than," and she caught herself. So we speculated, of course, what she would have said to finish that sentence, and we always thought, "This is worse than when I shot myself."
I can guarantee you that performance by Diane Downs made cops stand up at attention and take another look at her story.
But I don't get the lack of self-awareness on her part, because even if initially she wasn't quite aware how she was coming off in a particular interview, the people who are going to be talking about the interview are going to be talking about all the things we talked about, how she's completely detached from what she's describing and she's smiling. So you would think she would go, oh, I need to actually pretend to be a little bit more sad about these events for my next interview. But it seems like in each one of these interviews, it's just the same thing over and over again.
I think that, well, do you have something you want to say about that, Tracy? Because I was going to say, I think that it's, because I've seen this repeatedly in these interviews with murderers, the ones who I think qualify as sociopaths, psychopaths, the ones who have been diagnosed as such, like she has, like Diane Downs has, it's that there's something off with them and they're mimics, but it doesn't come naturally to them. So that's why there's no self-awareness, because they're just mimicking human behavior that they've seen, but they're not good at being able to tell when they should use that behavior. And if what they use, there's a show I watched, The Behavior Panel, with these 4 behavior experts. And one of the guys there always says, whatever has worked for the organism in the past is what they're going to use when they're in a crisis. And so this, to me, tells me that she's used to using laughter. Like, that's something she's learned how to mimic, and kind of like being chummy with people. She's learned to mimic that, but she doesn't know when it's inappropriate to use it. So it comes out when she's in crisis, because that's what she's always relied on, to be like, I'm human, I'm normal, I'm likable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but she's just never cries though at all. Like if she was crying and then start laughing at parts, like okay, I could get that, but why just the very elemental thing of just crying because of your children dying just seems like something they'd be able to understand and at least be able to mimic that, even though if they broke at certain points, where would it be realistic for someone to break at that moment?
I was giving you space to say something if you wanted to, Tracy. Sorry.
Oh no, I mean, I think I agree with both of you. I think she's definitely removed from emotions. I was just listening. I'm sorry, I was kind of floating
That's
away
okay.
on what you guys were saying. She definitely is mimicking behavior. She definitely has no genuine emotion of her own, and it's all about me, 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 me. Like I said, the whole murder was facilitated because a coworker that she wanted to be with told her he didn't want children and went back to his ex-wife.
And that, go ahead.
They worked at the post office. They were both postal workers. So I guess going postal, has a whole different meaning here. And yeah, and that's why she did it. She literally thought if she got rid of the kids, he might come back to her. Same thing with Susan Smith. She tried to get rid of her kids because the man she was dating didn't want kids.
Susan Smith, exactly. They found out she was having an affair with this guy, and because he didn't want kids, she thought getting rid of them would be a way to, worm her way into his heart. I have some videos of her pulled up as well, but there was one I hadn't planned to talk about that just came to mind. That's pretty similar. But when we watched that car reenactment, have you read anything about Robert Allen Fritta?
No, I haven't. That's one I haven't deep dived into.
I'm going to show you just a quick clip because it's very similar, his affect when he's being right after the murder. So he murdered his wife, and this is during the period where he was very happy to give lots of interviews.
Like Chris Watts.
Chris Watts.
Chris Watts, yeah.
But more, at least Chris Watts was the type who tried to feign. I think he faked it better at being worried about them a little bit better. There were tells, which we can look at, but this guy, Robert, he reminds me of Diane Downs in that there's none of the appropriate emotions, and not even an attempt to fake the appropriate emotions that you would feel if someone else killed your wife. Okay.
Left over from a payment.
But the cash alone wasn't enough evidence to hold Fratta. And since he had an airtight alibi, police had to let him go.
Investigators who were all veteran skilled interrogators were all of agreement that he was showing signs of deception in the interview, and he just wasn't acting appropriately. Everyone involved was convinced at this time that Bob Fratta had had his wife killed.
They started questioning. I guess we got here
when Fratta left.
Oh, right. This one was murder for hire. That's right. He hired someone.
The station the next afternoon, a crowd of reporters surrounded him. He did not shy away from the cameras.
When I first got there, I initially thought it was a drug raid. Everybody looked calm. Nobody was frantic about anything. I saw everything taped off, and I thought I saw Farah. I still don't know who it was that I saw, but I thought it was Farah standing there. I was going to actually walk up to her and joke, "Oh, what do you got, a drug raid going on here?"
Across the parking lot, Sergeant John Denholm, who had conducted part of Fratta's police interview, was also speaking to the press.
He's lying. He's been lying all night. I mean, y'all.
Denholm suggested questions for reporters to pose to Fratta.
They said you showed no emotion, no sorrow, even though the mother of your children was just shot and killed.
Well, I don't know. I also don't remember.
Did you see a smile there?
Yeah. Yeah, that was he's just egregious.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
That's just egregious. Either he's the most unaware person, unself-aware person around, or he literally has no concept of emotion. Yeah, I don't know which it is, but definitely.
I think no concept of human emotion.
Because from that point on, it's a major blur.
Admit it doesn't look good?
Of course I can, and I hope they find the guy.
Do you see a smile right there?
Yeah.
He's close to Fratta.
Sorry,
I said you showed no emotion, no sorrow, even though the mother of your children was just shot and killed.
Well, I don't know. if I honestly don't remember, because from that point on, it's a major blur.
Admit it doesn't look good.
Of course I can. And I hope they find the guy soon.
Smile.
One detective tossed Fratta his car keys, but Fratta missed the catch, and the keys drew blood on his cheek. Reporter Dan Locke was at the scene that day.
And he looks right into the camera, and he licks and wipes off the speck of blood. And then he kind of winks at the camera. He's playing to the cameras, and this is a murder case.
That's crazy.
I think I am going to deep dive this case. This is interesting.
You have to. This guy, I didn't put him on the list. I didn't prepare you. Sorry. I'd forgotten about him until we watched that Diane Downs with her car. And I just remembered that, oh yeah, there was that guy where he was a complete narcissist in all the cameras, and he loved the TV cameras, and, claimed, like all these people, claimed complete innocence. Yeah. And of course the guy he hired came forward, and they nailed him to the wall with the evidence.
Scott Peterson, I think, enjoyed the camera too.
Yes.
A lot. You're like about Chris Watts. I don't think Chris Watts liked it so much, but at least he, like you said, he did feign it was obviously fake. It was the fakest emotion I've ever seen, but he did put on a good show, or try to at least.
Yes. I've got Susan Smith queued up. Should we watch? This one's very short. Should we watch a clip of her?
Sure.
Okay. Susan Smith, as we mentioned, pretty similar to Diane Downs in some ways. Also killed her 2 children, and in this case, she drove the car into a lake. This was in South Carolina, and she drowned them, and then she claimed that a black man had carjacked her.
Just out of nowhere, this black guy came up and just opened the door and jumped in the car.
Yeah. I mean, of all the way, okay, can we just excuse the fact that killing of anybody, unless it's in self-defense, is wrong? But drowning your children, the methods that you use, I think drowning, that is the kind of death that gives me nightmares. I mean, to be drowned, I'd rather be shot. I'd rather be hung.
That's what Andrea Yates did to her kids. So.
Yes, drowning. This video is from the Behavior Panel, the channel that I mentioned that I watch a lot.
I can't do anything but think about it. And I just want to hug him so bad and tell him I love him.
Greg, what do you got?
Okay, that right there is fake crying. And we've seen that with other people who we've talked about on this channel who we think are personality disordered, like Amber Heard during the Amber Heard trial. It's where someone is like fake. They're doing they're altering their voice to make it sound like they're experiencing high emotion. They're making their voice higher, and they're faking sniffles, but there's no tears. The nose is not running. There's no flush to the face. There's nothing that signals that they're actually crying. It is a fake cry. Are you giggling?
So I was wondering about like why the people we talked about prior to this could do that, because I would expect all these people to be like the one we just showed, how they all try to mimic that emotion, but they can't do it. They're bad actors.
Well, with Chris Watts, there was no tears, but he was dancing literally back and forth, foot to foot. And it was very distracting, and it was obviously nervous energy coming out. It was like nervous panic energy. Yes. And so he was just, he was trying to cross his arms, but he was, back and forth. So that, to me, that's what was an instant giveaway for me.
Yes.
I'm like, he's too nervous.
He had so much, and there's also a lot of footage with him too. They happen to have body cam. The cop who responded to the scene had a body camera on him, and
Officer
so you
Coonrod. I'll never forget that name. That's literally his name, Officer
Coonrod.
Coonrod. I will never forget his name.
Okay, I've got this is a very short clip from the Susan Smith press conference. Wait. Sorry, I didn't add it to the stage. Here we go.
More than 8 days since Susan Smith claims a carjacker stole her 2 babies. What everyone hoped would be a joyous appearance by Susan and David Smith becomes yet another anguished plea.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home to us where they belong.
Yeah. Just fakery.
She should be in jail just for that bad acting job.
She did a lot of fake tears in interviews.
So is she still in prison, I assume?
She is. She has a lesbian lover, from what I understand.
I didn't know. I have not
What happens in female prisons like this? I don't know.
checked to see what's happening on her. Thank you for the super chat, Peter Stawicki, for $5. He says, Darlie Rudier here in the Dallas area, absolutely in the same group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is crazy. My husband's family knew this family. They knew her. And that's when I started reading up on this case, because there are some people who think she didn't do it and, you know, didn't kill her kids, that there really was an intruder. I don't believe that. I read up on that one. I didn't include her on this list, but it's so weird. I just got chills seeing your super chat, because that's I didn't learn about her till my husband's family was talking about the case, because they had known her and her parents.
Of all the family annihilators that I've studied, the only one that I can have even a monica of sympathy for is Andrea Yates, because she was legitimately mentally ill. They gave her she got no help, even though she wanted help, and she was legitimately led down the wrong road by a religious fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt bad for her. I felt bad for her. Not that I'm excusing what she did to drown your children in a bathtub, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but if she had just gotten the mental health that she needed, she wouldn't have hurt her kids. She was not evil. She was not trying to hurt her kids. She legitimately thought she was saving them from something terrible because of the delusion she was having.
Mm-hmm.
And that case broke my heart. That case absolutely broke my heart.
That was I remember that was a rough year for Houston press, because that story happened in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also another story that year of, what was the woman's name? I want to say Clara Harris, but
Yes.
this woman,
ran her husband over.
Yes. Yeah. That happened in Houston as well. And that was also the same year the Enron thing broke. And so just remember that time. I was like, just one horrific story after another.
Clara Harris. I didn't put her on the list either, but yeah, there's video footage of her car. Her
Mm-hmm.
husband was having an affair, and she went to the hotel. Correct me if I get any of the facts wrong with that one, but she went to the hotel where she knew he was with his mistress. She had their daughter in the car.
Oh, I didn't remember her daughter being in the car.
Her daughter was in the car, and she ran him over and just kept going over his body.
And she was able to get out of that because it was a crime of passion, right? Or did she get convicted?
I think she was convicted.
Okay.
I think so too. I can't remember the details, but I think so too.
Was it because she ran him over so many times? Like if she had just hit him once, would they be, okay, he was cheating, I could let it go?
So here she was convicted. I'm looking it up in 2003. She actually, the video footage, they wouldn't have had the video footage if it wasn't for her. She had hired a private investigator to follow her husband and get video footage. So it was her own private investigator who taped what she did. But she did use the crime of passion as her defense, that she was momentarily insane.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It's one that kind of popped up again. I can't remember its name, but it happened in New Orleans, down in Louisiana. Abusing him. And the father, during the perp walk, the father of the boy stepped out from a phone booth and shot him, or stepped out from a phone thing and shot him. And he actually got off using the crime of passion, temporary insanity plea. It just reminded me of that. And I think it was perfectly justified, one less predator on the face of the earth. But sorry, anybody out there disagrees?
Be interesting to see statistics of how many people who are being prosecuted use the crime of passion as a excuse, and also be curious to find out how many people actually are able to avoid jail time based on that as well.
My husband has joined the chat. Hello, he was at the gym earlier. He says, yes, my parents were very good friends with the in-laws of Darlie Routier. I don't think I'm saying the name right. It was nuts when that went down in the 90s. That's how I first heard about that case. Justin, thank you for the super chat. Justin Akinsola for $9.99, who says, as a straight guy, I like true crime, but when it's specifically centered on mafiosos or other criminal gangs.
Me too.
You guys are all fitting the data, because my husband probably didn't hear this at the beginning, but we were looking at studies that show that men more often read true crime about criminal gangs, or about war, like war and history and historical events, and women more often read true crime or watch true crime about serial killers and murders.
It makes sense. I mean, as a man, more concerned about a group of man. One man, not that concerned about, but a group of man, yes. If a woman, obviously women in general tend to be physically weaker than most men, and so I could understand them being more concerned about an individual.
Now, I like stories about. There's a show on. It's called Gangland. I believe it's on A&E. I do enjoy that because they cover.
Oh yeah.
They covered like the neo-Nazis. They covered the Crips and the Bloods. It's very interesting. The Latin Kings. They cover all of them. It's actually very interesting.
I love that show, but I also remember watching it and being depressed because Houston, my hometown, has basically every gang of every type you could think of. MS-13 and skinheads and Crips, and we got it all. Super diverse.
I am stereotypical. I fit the data. I don't care anything about watching gang crime dramas or gang crime, true crime. I don't know why. I just am like, whatever. Janice says my mic is muffled. Is anybody else think that? I'm going to try to get closer to it.
A little. I thought it was just my
was
earphones. I thought it was going out. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to get a little closer. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. We've got again, so much to cover. We're just in the women section. I'm going to move on. I have other Susan Smith clips, but let's move on to one of the ones that really captivated the nation, and because there was a trial. I think sometimes if the person pleads guilty, you don't have a trial, and then it falls out of the news. But because there was a trial, this one just continued to be in the headlines. And this is Jodi Arias. Can we talk about her?
Yep. Travis Scott and Jodi Arias. Mormons.
Okay, you want to give Tracy? Why don't I have you give the broad strokes of each case, since you know about all of them?
Okay. This happened. I want to say mid-90s. Travis Scott. He was in an MLM known as Prepaid Legal Services. It's called something else now. It's one of the insurance MLMs. He brought up in the Mormon faith, raised in California, had a terrible childhood, abuse, poverty. It was really a rags to riches story. He rose to the top of the pyramid and was one of the few that actually become a millionaire, selling MLM products and recruiting people. Well, he recruited Jodi Arias, who was troubled teen, runaway, jumped man to man, was working as a server, got into the MLM under Travis's recruitment to make extra money, met Travis, who was at the very top of her upline in Las Vegas. They hooked up. She fell head over heels. He liked her too, but he was a very traditional Mormon, and he was going to marry a traditional Mormon woman. She converted to more LDS for him and everything. She was his fun girl.
Mm-hmm.
And he was pretty honest about that. He said, and then she said that no, he wasn't. He was leading her on, and she was stalking him. She'd slash his tires. She broke into his house a couple times, went in through the pit door, and like would move stuff around his room. And he moved from California to Arizona, and just really creepy. And then broke into his didn't break into his house. Came up for a tryst, and then killed him. And there were actually photographs that she had taken of them with his camera of him in the shower, and then he was dead. And they ended up, it was a long trial. They ended up finally, I believe, convicting her, and just very brutal, very brutal.
Because she stabbed him like 40, 50 times, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
27 times.
27.
There was blood all over his house.
And just a date correction, this was in 2008.
Yeah. I believe they met in the mid-90s, and then it happened in the early 2000s.
And she also, when you're talking about the creepy stuff she was doing, like after he'd broken up with her, I didn't know that she went through the doggy door. I did know that she would lurk outside his house in the bushes and watch him on dates with other women. Okay,
He was
so
dating some very traditional Mormon women, try to find that traditional Mormon wife. And she would like drive by their apartments wherever they were, slash their tires. Typical crazy stalker.
Total crazy stalker. The other thing is, I think she has the crazy eyes, just like Diane Downs in the Oprah clip with like, and you can see it in a lot of the photos that they took together. She's absolutely narcissistic and obsessed with her appearance. And in fact, and she loved the camera. She did so many jailhouse interviews. She was so obsessed with her makeup and looking good for the camera that somebody compiled. I was trying to find different clips of that, and I found this great channel that had already compiled all the makeup clips. So let's just watch this. This is a compilation here.
Was she surprised?
Actually not. She was not surprised. One of the things she said to me as soon as she saw me was, is there any way I can get my purse so I can get my makeup on?
She asked if she could get her makeup on?
Yes.
To be arrested?
Yes.
Really trivial question, and it's gonna.
So before being arrested for the murder of her boyfriend, on again, off again boyfriend, because they were still, even though they were broken up, whenever he would tell friends, well, she just showed up here and I don't want to make her leave. And then he would have sex with her usually. Like he didn't really cut it off completely. So this guy that she still has this relationship with, at least sexual, she just finds out he's dead. They're arresting her for the murder and she wants to put her makeup on. I'm sorry. It's
reasonable.
No, it's not reasonable. It's crazy. It's completely, your priorities are so out of whack. Okay, now this is from her first interrogation. I've got clips of this for later, but let's just watch the makeup thing.
Reveal how shallow I am. Really trivial question, and it's gonna reveal how shallow I am. But before they book me, can I clean myself up a little bit?
You're going to be taken for what you are.
Fake tears, by the way. Fake tears while she's saying, I've got a trivial question. It's going to reveal how shallow I am. But I just want to know, can I? Like, totally fake tears and asking, can she clean herself up and put makeup on?
You should have at least done your makeup, Jodi. Gosh.
Sorry.
Notice how she's not rubbing her hair there. It's so like a commercial, like back in the chair.
Yeah. It's like she knows they're probably watching her on camera. And she's talking to herself like, oh, I should have put makeup on, Jodi.
Why'd she say that?
Makeup, Jodi. Gosh.
Sorry. Don't roll the tape yet.
That'd be great.
Yay, bottled water.
Never put my makeup on in front of a total stranger, but that's okay. You're not that much of a stranger.
Jodi was really concerned about her image right from the get-go.
It's been like weeks since I put makeup on. I'm glad to see this is waterproof. I don't plan to cry, but, I probably won't.
I don't plan to cry.
She wants to be the prettiest girl in prison.
Travis Houston, I used to argue about my driving because my rearview mirror was always facing me instead of toward the back. He made me feel vain sometimes.
It appeared to me as if she had some experience behind the
Wait a minute. I just have to pause this. Vermont Cheddar in the chat. Are you crazy? I still date her.
He's willing to take that risk. Crazy
With a
in the head means
bodyguard.
crazy in the bed.
What did you say?
Yeah, crazy in the head means crazy in the bed.
Oh my gosh.
Never heard that?
Until she cut your weenie off.
Hey, lots of men are willing to take that risk. I mean, on the edge.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, she actually gave our crew direction.
Whatever you want to change, or if you don't think something looks right, just let me know. I'll adjust it. I guess if I start getting shiny, then we can take a break. Can you do me a favor and just hold that? Sure. Sorry.
I got it.
As the jury gets ready to consider a possible death sentence. It was filmed just after her 2008 arrest, and it's a very different side of the woman we
Killer.
I guess I've seen better days, but that'll have to do.
ABC's 2020 shot this interview with the notoriously vain femme fatale just after she was arrested in the summer of 2008, just after she flashed this smile in her mugshot. Jodi Arias as smug and confident as ever.
There is one thing I wanted to address, and that is my mugshot. I think I did a little tilt on my head and gave a little smile. I just want to address that because I think that people don't really understand. And there are a few reasons I did that. And one is one of my first thoughts when I was actually being booked. I was a little like, wow, I see this stuff on TV all the time. This is so interesting. It's almost just like it is on TV. And I thought to myself,
again, the smile. Why? You're on trial for murdering your boyfriend, and the smile and the flirty eyes. She's doing the flirty eyes thing, and it's just like, this isn't a close confidant and friend or a girlfriend or a guy that you're trying to seduce, but it is. She's doing the seducer. She's trying to seduce the audience and the cameraman and everyone there. AJ Boz.
I knew it. See, I knew someone in the audience was going to say that. I knew it.
Stop it, you guys. You know, they like to give women a lot of crap. The women that are attracted, the crazy women that are attracted to serial killers like Ted Bundy. But you guys in the chat are like,
well, it was interesting because this was, I guess, not too long after Casey Anthony. And those are both cases where you had attractive women who are being accused of murdering someone else. And that was part of the appeal of the story, because so many people just, for some reason, think that pretty people can't be as evil as ugly people or something. They just think that all ugly people are going to look hideous and you'll know them. But yes, someone who's just kind of pretty and dainty and talks very sweet, you're like, oh, that person can't be a bloodthirsty murderer.
Yeah. What did
Diane Downs was ugly as hell.
Who was?
Diane Downs.
Diane Downs. I still want to put her side by side with Jeffrey Marsh. I think they have a lot of similarities.
Myself, what would Travis do if he were in this situation? This is why I'm here. And barring the fact that he would likely not get himself into such circumstances, he would be smiling. He would be like, hey, he would just flash this grin that he always does. And so there was part of that. And then also part of the fact that I knew it would be all over the internet. So why not? And then there was also the fact that I know that I'm innocent. And even though this is a very serious thing to be charged with, there's no reason for me to be sad, because I know that I'm not, that I'd never hurt Travis. And there's no reason.
One quick note here and red flag. A lot of times when you look at these interviews with guilty people and they're lying, sometimes they get around saying, not always, but sometimes instead of saying outright, I didn't kill him, they'll use a different tense. They say, I would never hurt him. I would never kill him. Instead of saying I didn't do it, which is harder for some of them to say that explicit lie, they say something more about their character. I would never hurt anyone. I would never. It's just a slight difference that they can't commit to. And that's not true for her, because she did explicitly sometimes say I didn't do it. But I just noticed she did that right there. Where it's like, I would never, except you did.
Reason to be upset over this in my mind. Everything, I have faith that in the end, everything will be made known, everything will come out. And in the meantime, smile, say cheese.
Jeez.
Here, I've got a clip of her pulled up because she did, this is the first of her interrogations, and she also made the news for her behavior in the interrogation room, singing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You remember this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember this.
When they would leave the room and she was sitting there alone, you would see stuff like this.
It's done your makeup, Jodi. Gosh. I didn't hear you breathe.
Oh, that's creepy.
Don't breathe. I didn't hear you breathe.
What? What song? Is she making up a song? What song is that?
The subtitle said it was some Dido song. I don't know.
I judge her for that.
Yeah. Why that's what?
I think you can tell me what you think is going on here, but I think again, you've got this narcissist, this sociopath, and they've learned certain things, certain mimics. And I think she's so narcissistic, she doesn't realize this is inappropriate, but she's excited about them watching her through the camera, and she wants them to know she's a good singer. How could she have killed someone? She's singing.
auditioning.
Yeah. She's trying to make herself look like an innocent little girl.
Yes. Tracy, you nailed it. In fact, in part of this interrogation, you'll see, I don't know if it's going to show it in this clip, but she pulls her knees up to her chest like a little baby, like a little girl, and is sitting there with her feet on the chair with her knees up under her boobs, the way a child would sit.
She's looking for another song in there. She's like a cam girl. Literally, she's acting like a cam girl.
A cam girl.
Yeah.
A true.
I was going to say, like, if she wasn't still in prison, I bet Playboy someone would offer her to try to get her to pose for him.
He knows our need. Still breathing.
It's so creepy. It's like a horror movie.
Jodi was then taken to the county.
Okay. Is that your first time seeing those clips from Street Chris?
Yeah, I've never seen it before.
I like showing you stuff like this.
The song's stuck in my head now. I didn't see you, babe.
I have other clips of her, but she also gave, like Diane Downs, she contradicted herself. She gave multiple versions of what happened in this first interview. I don't know if it's worth showing, maybe just a little bit of it. Her first story was that she never went to his house, even though she was on a road trip and they can't account for 48 hours. And she insists that she never went there. And then they point out, well, your cell phone was turned off conveniently during these hours, so we couldn't track your whereabouts. And she was like, oh, it just died during those 2 days.
Well, the catalyst was that Travis had won a trip to either Jamaica or the Bahamas through his job, and he was supposed to take Jodi, but then in the last minute he met this girl and was starting to date her, and so he told Jodi she couldn't go and was taking the other girl, and that was evidently the final catalyst for Jodi.
I was supposed to get on the 15 and go all the way up. And I somehow got off the 15.
Where did you end up?
For a while I was lost, and I'm not above sleeping in the car, so I slept for a while. I'm a heavy sleeper and I sleep a lot, so.
But you were on the 15 for a while, and you ended up getting off the 15 somewhere.
Yeah, I looked at a map, and I'm pretty sure I know where I went. Can I draw you a map?
Sure. So this trip took you a little over 48 hours then. I have a problem with this trip.
Well, I went first too.
Yeah, I know. I know you went down here. I've gone over this trip over and over in my mind and on paper. And even if there's still 20 some odd hours, even if you pulled over to sleep a couple of times.
Oh, did I tell you that I got stranded?
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned that. If you slept for 10 hours,
I only slept for about 8
here and
hours.
here, it would still leave 18 some odd hours for something else. Okay. This is what people are focusing on, is this trip that you took. Because they're saying she left, she didn't get to till Thursday.
She should tell him that a black guy stole her car.
What?
She should tell him that a black guy stole her car.
Well, do you know what comes later? I'm kidding.
I want that to be everyone's defense. Black guy did it.
Well, her second story, when they brought her in for her next interrogation, which I believe was the day after, her second story was suddenly, okay, I was there because now they've told her we found this evidence. She was a photographer, fancied herself a photographer, and they found in the washing machine at his apartment, they found her camera, as you mentioned, Tracy, with a bunch of photos on it. She put it through the wash because I guess she thought that would destroy the evidence.
It was a brand new digital camera. I believe it was his, but it was a brand new digital camera. And he had a huge house. I mean, he was well off, and he pretty much lived in his master suite. So he had, the bathroom and the bedroom, and then he had two other men that roomed with him, paid him rent, lived in the other bedrooms, and they confirmed that they had seen her. So that was another thing that kind of blew the story out of the water.
Okay, I forgot or didn't know that they had confirmed they had seen her. I know they found the camera and they were able to get the photos off of the card, the digital card, and there were photos of his last moments alive in the shower, and right as she's stabbing him, she's taking pictures. And so in this interview, the second interrogation after they've told her this, she's got to come up with another story. And so you see her here even saying I'm not going to show it in this clip, but she's like, I'm thinking. And she keeps asking them, can I see the photos? Can I see the photos? What's on the photos? Because she wants to know how to craft her story. She doesn't know what's on the pictures. And then this was her second explanation sheet where she says, okay, I was at his house, but here's what happened.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you that how many times her story changed.
Changed a lot.
Why not? Did someone catch you there? Someone not expecting you to be there?
Didn't see my car.
Then who was it?
Listen, I can tell you. I can tell you everything that I know or that I remember.
Okay. What do you remember?
Is there any way I can see those pictures?
Can I see the pictures first?
No, not right now.
Can I see them soon? I will.
You need to start letting me know what happened. Okay. You're telling me that some other people were there.
He was kneeling down in the shower. I don't remember him. If this is his shower and the sink is over here, I was like right here taking pictures. And I don't really know what happened after that exactly, except I think he was shot.
Where were you?
If this is his shower, I'm just sitting here. I was like, well, if this is his shower, I'm sitting here. I was like right here on my knees, and his bathtub is right here, and I was taking him here. And I was just going through the pictures, and I heard this loud ring. And I don't really remember except Travis was screaming. I think I got knocked out, but I don't think it was that long. And there were two people there, and
What'd you say?
I remember putting my hand on his back because he was on all four of his knees. He was like on his knees like this, doing something like this or something like, I don't know. And I was like, are you okay? What's going on? What's going on? He's like, go get help. Go.
So just quickly, when you dropped out for technical reasons, Tracy, we were talking about, Mystery Chris pointed out how Diane Downs was giving all this superfluous details and information that's not really what they're after.
Mm-hmm.
And how a lot of times guilty people do this in interrogations. And I think it's sort of like she's doing that here. Like, and I remember touching his back and I remember saying this. And it's like, you just said there were two people there. What did they do? If this really happened, it would be two people came in, they had a gun, they shot him. It not like, and then I remember after the two people came in, I was touching his back. Like, no, you say what happened because it's real and it's in your memory, and that's the important part of the memory, you know.
Yeah.
And then if they want to pick apart and ask you what you were thinking or feeling during it, they do that. But this is not what an honest person does.
No, correct. A lot of surveillance video I've watched of anybody that's been found guilty, they do add in a lot of unnecessary detail.
Yes.
Go get help. And I said, okay. And I turned around. There were two people there. One was a guy and one was a girl. I couldn't tell that at first, but I could just see one was a girl. And I assumed the other was a guy because their build and then their voices. Travis was screaming the whole time. He wasn't screaming like a girl. He was just like he was in pain, like he was like shocked, like, oh, you know.
What happened, Jodi? What did you see?
I took it out like a little bitch.
What?
A fake cry. I don't have much to add to that one. It's just, there's hours of this. If you guys want to go watch it, it's fascinating. There's tons of tells. There's the fake crying. The fact that you mentioned Tracy, her story kept changing. So she said there were these two assailants, and the only reason she didn't mention going there at the beginning and the reason she lied and said she was never there was because they said they would find her and kill her if she told what happened. And isn't it true she stuck with that until the trial?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, she was a well-honed liar from the beginning. I mean, when she met Travis, she was living with another guy in a house that she bought in Palm Springs. I mean, this was an older gentleman. They were working at a resort, and she works as a server. I believe he was a cook or something like that, and she had gotten involved with him. And so she was an accomplished liar from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. She, this is one of the interviews she gave before the trial, and when she was still sticking to this story that there were two assailants. Of course, when she got to trial, and this was televised, the trial, Then her story changed, and she actually put blame on the victim. He's dead. You've killed him. He's not there to defend himself. And at trial, she shocked everyone by saying, okay, I lied. There were no intruders. I killed him, but it was because he was trying to kill me and because he was a pedophile and I found kitty stuff on his computer, which there was no evidence of.
Correct.
Who could have done this? I don't know. Who do you think killed him?
I have no idea.
Jodi, you're pretty calm sitting here. How are you managing to stay so calm?
Through my faith and through the knowledge of my own innocence. That's the only thing. I would be shaking in my boots right now if I had to answer to God for such a heinous crime.
I had to include this because this makes me so sick. Like the most sick. To hide behind God, to put on the cloak of Christianity when you've been caught doing something evil, and to try and get Christians to believe you and sympathize with you, just like taking God's name in vain. You freaking liar.
But hey, Keri, I will tell you on what you were saying about her trying to blame Travis. And I did a 3-part video on a 3-part series on this. And in one of those, this is what I said, and I got so much hate. People's telling me I was victim blaming. That's not what I was trying to do. What I said was Travis did, in a way, contribute to his own death by continuing to entertain and sleep with crazy.
Yes.
That guys, if you see somebody that's a crazy stalker, you get a restraining order and you stay away from them. You don't, when they come to your house, let them in and then sleep with them. That's what I said. And I got accused of victim blaming so much. But what I'd said, if he had used any of just an ounce of common sense, he would have still been alive.
I agree with you. It's not victim blaming. It's what we talked about at the very beginning. One of the things you can learn from true crime, if you watch these stories over and over, is you don't put your D in crazy. Like you don't.
To ask for, Keri.
It's and look in the chat. I'm just kidding. I know you're joking, Vermont Cheddar, but says it's still totally dateable. No,
it'll work. It'll be fine.
So many of these cases, the victim had no part in it. They were surprised. They were shocked. It just happened. But this is one of the ones I've covered where he could have saved himself had he just, pushed away. So I had to mention it,
It doesn't mean it's his fault. It's absolutely not his fault. It's something you can take away to, God forbid, to never find yourself in this situation. It's like learning how, like that true crime story I mentioned, where it's maybe somebody will hear the testimony of that woman who survived and decide, hey, I'm going to learn how to use a gun, at least so I feel comfortable around guns and they're not something mystical to me or that I don't know how to use. Mystified, sorry. And you can take several practical things away from these horrible stories, which is, don't date crazy. Learn how to use a gun just in case. Like,
there
don't
was a
hitchhike.
pattern of disturbing behavior like that from her. There was just this huge pattern of disturbing behavior.
Yes. Where is it? I just saw that in chat. I think it was Turi said, don't hitchhike. That's another,
Don't pick up hitchhikers.
Don't pick up hitchhikers. I agree. People still do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I know we live in the age of Uber, but at least with Uber, you're tracked in that app and people know who's driving and who's riding. So most people aren't going to commit murder if they can be tracked like that. So that is the one safety precaution.
I think
people have, but
Pee-wee's Big Adventure was a warning for people not to hitchhike. You might run into Large Marge.
Marge. Yes. Okay, I've got another video clip queued up, and we're going to move on to another, since we're doing all the women up top. Casey Anthony. Now, I know that in the end, she was not convicted, but this woman is guilty.
She did it.
She absolutely did it. And there are some similarities here with some of the other cases we've talked about. She killed her child because her child was getting in the way of the life that she wanted. And she also, I think a similarity with Jodi Arias was, when she got to trial, Jodi Arias tried to find, it's like, what is something that the jury will respond to that might be a reason why this happened, kind of thing? And how can I get them to sympathize with me? So she tried to say, oh, Travis was sexually aggressive with me and abusive towards me. And also I found this kitty material on his computer, which they couldn't find. So she tried to use that to gain sympathy. Well, Casey Anthony did the same thing. When she got to trial, she said her father had sexually abused her.
Right.
Which her parents are like, no way. And her father was one of her biggest offenders. And so I have a clip pulled up to show related to her, but I have to run, take a quick break. I'll be right back. Can you, while I'm gone, would you mind, Tracy, are you capable of telling people a little bit about the Casey Anthony case?
Sure.
Okay, I'll be right back.
So, Casey Anthony, probably one of the biggest murder trials ever in the United States. Basically, you had Casey Anthony, who was a troubled young lady. She was a chronic liar, compulsive liar, had lied her whole life. She ended up getting pregnant by we don't know who. She named at least 2 or 3 different gentlemen as the father of her young daughter, Kaylee. And basically was lying. She lived with her parents in Florida, in Hollywood, in Orlando. There's another case that was Adam Walsh was in Hollywood, Florida. Excuse me. She was living with them in Orlando. She basically was lying to them, lying to her friends about working at Universal Studios. Would go so far as to leave for work every day and go hang out, get her nails done, do whatever, and act like she was working every day. She was stealing money from her parents. And basically one day, Kaylee just disappeared. And she told them that the nanny she had hired had ran off with her. Zanny the nanny. Zanaya.
What, her name was Zanny.
Zanny. Zanaya. And
It's
basically
like,
she...
Well, can I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
Remember that office? Was it The Office? Somebody told me about the clip where he goes, "What's your dentist's name?" And he goes, "Crentist." Dentist named Crentist. That's what she literally made up a person, Nanny the Zanny the nanny.
Oh, there was a woman in Jacksonville, Florida, who had that name, Zanaya, the whole 9 yards, and sued her because she said that it made her life a living hell.
Wow.
And she had invented a boyfriend that moved to North Carolina, and she had a friend named Juliette Lewis. And they all worked for Universal Studios, and she invented trips to Busch Gardens and just all kinds of stuff. And finally, her mother got real suspicious and finally called the cops because Casey basically left the car that she was driving, was her parents' car, abandoned it in a parking lot for days. Well, actually for weeks. And it finally got towed, and they called her father to come and get the car out of impound. And when they got there, they opened the trunk, and the smell of death was all in the trunk. And so that's when her mother finally found her. She was staying with her then boyfriend, who was a college student, and went and got her, brought her back. And she never confessed. She, as I said, she was found not guilty, but she did it. And my theory is that she was drugging Kaylee, probably with Xanax, so that she could go out and party with her boyfriend, who was a club promoter, and gave her too much, and she died. And so they duct taped her, they wrapped her up, they put her in a plastic bag, and they buried her basically out behind the Anthony home in an area that was flooded due to a hurricane. And then when the waters receded, a meter reader happened to see what looked to be a skull, a rat skull in the area. He actually called the cops twice, reporting it, and no one would ever investigate it. And finally, when it had receded enough for him to actually walk up, he saw it. He called them. They came out, and that's where they found the body.
What was the
Or the remains,
timeline
rather.
between her allegedly, burying this body and then the person finding it?
It
How
was
long?
less than a year. Less than a year.
Less than a year.
But because she had been the body had been underwater, it had decomposed and kind of washed away a lot of stuff.
So what about her parents? Did her parents not wonder where their grandchild was?
Yes, I mean her mother, but they supported her. There's this weird relationship between her parents and her. They absolutely believe foul play was involved, but she had them convinced that it was not her.
She was such a pathological liar. Just refresh my memory. Didn't she also lie about going to college for what her parents thought she was in college, but she wasn't?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she lied about graduating from high school. She ended up getting her GED because she had lied about her grades and all this stuff, and got to graduation. She wasn't going to graduate, and she was 3 or 4 credits short, and ended up having to go get her GED later. But she led her parents to believe she was going to graduate at any moment. She stole money from her grandmothers stole money from her account, the account that she used to pay for her grandfather that was in assisted living, stole money from her. She wrote bad checks. She got one of her friend's checkbooks, wrote all these bad checks, but would just cover it. Like I said, she had invented a job, a second job, a boyfriend, best friends. She just invented this whole life for herself that wasn't true.
One of the things I looked for, I'm still looking for and haven't found, but I'm pretty sure I remember seeing this, or maybe I didn't see it and they just talked about it during the trial, but didn't she take the police, much like we saw Diane Downs reenact the supposed crime with the car?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't she take the police because they were trying to pin her down on her job, and she said she worked at Universal Studios, but they were calling Universal Studios and they were like, she doesn't work here. Didn't she take them, the police, to Universal Studios and was walking through the lot trying to find where it was that she worked?
Yeah, she argued with security when they said they could not find her in the system. They called a supervisor. The supervisor said, I can't find you in the system. And then the cops actually took the security supervisor aside and said, hey, look, we know she's full of shit, but we want her to hang herself. Can you just let us walk around and we'll be responsible for it, the 2 detectives. And so he said, yeah. And so she led them all around Universal trying to find, because she said she was an events manager, trying to find the events office. She was speaking to people. Hey, how are you? And, people were kind of like,
who are you?
And finally she stopped and turned around and said, I don't work here, after leading them around for 15 or 20 minutes.
She said that, I don't work here. Do you remember, did we see that footage? Was it out? Or did we just hear about it in the case?
We just heard about it. This was in the 90s before body cams.
Okay.
So we're mandatory, and these were plainclothes detectives, and they didn't have body cams.
Okay, that's why I couldn't find it, because I was like, I remember her doing this, but I couldn't find the footage. Well, then let me show this one instead. And thank you for walking us through that.
There's a lot there.
There's so much there.
The best coverage of that case, hands down, is Stephanie Harlow. She did a 4-parter on it, and it is excellent coverage. Much better than mine, but it's great.
Stephanie Harlow. Okay.
She's awesome.
Here's a news report about the fake trip to the Universal to find her job. The thing that gets me about that is just, again, these people who, these narcissists who are such pathological liars, Jodi being another one, but the fact that she would commit to the lie to such a degree that she would walk the cop all around, and then finally she would not admit to the lie until until absolutely there's no other way around it. But to even go through, like, you would think she would say, a normal person would be like, I don't actually work there, before bothering to drive it. You know, you're not going to find the office where you work out there.
Right.
What are you doing? Like, it's so crazy.
The audio recordings played today showed the jury just how much investigators really laid into Casey Anthony.
And it's also when they called her out on lies they say she had been telling all along.
That's telling me that you are the second person, this cold-blooded callous monster who doesn't care and doesn't want to help because she's afraid that something so heinous happened that everyone's going to look at her and say, she's a monster, she deserves to go away, she deserves to never see the light of day, this bad thing should happen to her. I don't want to believe that right now, but you're giving me no choice. You understand? You're giving me no choice. This is going to be the opportunity that you have right now, no matter how heinous you think that what happened was to Kaylee. This is your opportunity to tell us. This is going to be your only opportunity to tell us. Because what's going to happen, we're going to find out. There's not going to be a question, we're going to find out. Okay? We've got so many resources on this right now, just like I told you would happen. That what we're trying to do is prove your story, but everything that we've done is disproven your story. Every single thing. Everything you've told us, we've shown you have lied about it. Casey has lied about it, and we're looking for your child. We got to throw these lies out, okay? All these lies are out. We know that everything you told us is a lie. Tell us what happened to Kaylee. Tell us what happened to Kaylee.
I dropped off Kaylee. And that's the last time that I've seen her. I dropped her
Where
off.
did you drop her off?
I dropped her off at that apartment.
No, you didn't.
That's exactly where I dropped her off.
And who'd you drop her off to?
With Zenaida.
No, you didn't. Because no, that's
person.
No, that's not true.
Did Zenaida give you any money that day?
No. I would not have sold my daughter if I.
Also, it's like, just like Jodi Arias, she tells one story until that story doesn't suit her anymore because they have evidence to prove it's false, that there's no nanny or whatever. Then she switches to this other story. Well, this happened and my father this and that, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's
just
just like
amazing.
they called her on the apartment because they had pulled all the rental records of that apartment where she took them and said Zanaya lived. Nobody by that name had ever lived there. In fact, the apartment she was pointing out had been vacant for almost a year. No one had lived there. And so it was just one provable lie after another, but she just insisted.
She just kept going.
Yeah.
Wanted to really just get rid of her. I would have left her with my parents and I would have left. I would have moved out. I would have given my mom custody.
Our legal expert says this testimony was today's key moment in the case.
And it was just one story after another. It was just fantastic to listen to it. It was just, I've never seen anything so complicated and every bit of it just untrue. And what they've been able to do today is to show through these lies that she had knowledge of what had happened to that child.
Judge Eaton expects the defense to claim it doesn't matter what she said. She concocted the lies to cover for an accidental.
Well, that was disappointing because it said it was about the fake Universal trip, but it wasn't. I apologize.
I believe that was the recording they took when they took her into an office at Universal, and that was the interrogation they recorded while after that famous walk around.
Once they got there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show. Can you guys hear that train?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, but I trust you that it's there.
I'm going to show another clip. This is from when she was in jail, and it's one of her conversations with her parents, with her dad.
Any stuff you want to talk to me about? Anything?
It's just nice hearing everything that's going on. I mean, I don't know what to say except I miss you guys, and I love you, and
I know you do. I love you too. I love you more than anything.
Person. I know, Dad. I want to see that little girl. I want to hear Kaylee laugh. I want to be with my baby. You know.
Now, remind me again of her story, because supposedly the story she told at trial, it involved her dad knowing that her daughter's dead, right?
Right. Basically, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Basically, the story she told was that she caught her father, had caught her father abusing Kaylee, and he had also abused her, and then the back door was left open, and Kaylee had wandered into the backyard. Now they have an above ground pool, and there was no deck. It was just an above ground pool with a ladder. And the ladder was supposedly always taken away if no one was there. And Kaylee wandered out, climbed up this ladder. Now she was 2 or 3, climbed up this ladder, got into the pool, and drowned. And then her father tried to cover. Her father's the one that buried her, trying to cover it up.
Okay. So this video was taken before she concocted that story to present at trial. This is
Right.
when she was in jail awaiting trial. And so this video call makes zero sense if her story is true. Because if her story is true, she knows that her dad buried her daughter. But at the time, she doesn't have that story yet. And she wants her dad to feel sympathy. She's playing her dad right here.
Yeah, and it's the stupidest excuse in the world. Drowning is like the leading cause of children's deaths in Florida because everyone has a pool. There's water everywhere. If it had actually been a drowning, there would have been no hesitation on the part of Mr. Anthony, who is a former sheriff's deputy in another state, but he's a former sheriff's deputy. There would have been no hesitation on his part to call and report an accidental drowning in the state of Florida.
Right.
Why
There's
would
no
a former
reason for
cop
him.
cover up, an accidental drowning? That's stupid.
Right. There's no reason for him to do that.
Right.
It's so crazy. So listen to the way she's playing her dad. This, of course, is before she's decided to tell the story that he buried her daughter and everything.
You more than anything.
Person. I know, Dad. I want to see that little girl. I want to hear Kaylee laugh. I want to be with my baby.
This is when she's still trying to convince the world and her parents and her dad right here that her daughter is with some nanny named Zanny. And she wants to see her and wants her back and pretending like she's still possibly alive.
That's my focus. Her birthday's in just a few days.
Yeah, it is just a few days away. And remember, we wanted to have that little one, just like taking her to a park or something, and just just be the immediate family. But now we want to have this great big one. So,
Casey, we have to find her before her 3rd birthday.
Mom,
That's coming up fast.
I know we have a couple weeks.
I don't want to wait another minute.
I don't want to wait another minute. I want her to be found, whether I'm still stuck in here or not. I don't care.
I think once she's found, then you can tell everybody what you know, and you'll be released. Don't you think?
Do you think here that the parents, they definitely, don't you think they're suspicious that she's not being honest, right?
George Anthony at one point told one of the investigators that he thinks his daughter had something to do with it. He literally said that. The mother, if she did start to suspect, she never let on. They've supported Casey through the whole thing. Except now, I think there's a big rift in the family, not because of that, but because of what Casey accused her father of.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you accused your father of something so horrible just to get off. And it's just incredible to me. But they grew up, they've known her since she grew up with them. They know she's a pathological liar. They found out about her lying about school and other things. And the fact that they can just keep giving her the benefit of the doubt.
Yep. I mean, I understand a parent's love, but in a case like this, there has to be a limit to that.
Yeah.
Potentially, I don't know. Yuri has it set in his mind that I've done something.
Well, he thinks you guys did something to Kaylee. All I'm trying to do is find Kaylee for both of us.
Oh, I know.
For all of us. And I'll do whatever it takes.
I feel the exact same way. That's exactly what I've been saying. I don't care what I have to do. When I told them I would lie, I would steal, I would do whatever by any means to get her back. That's exactly how I feel. It's the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to.
And then for her to come out of prison, or well, not come out of prison, come out of hiding, and then just be given a television show. Somebody
Yeah,
like
she has a
that.
show?
She did. She was a docuseries on Hulu, I believe.
Can you remind me, in that series, she still maintains her innocence, right?
Correct.
Here,
In
let
fact,
me show.
she
Go ahead.
works for the one of the investigators that her attorney hired to kind of try to prove her innocence.
This is one of the biggest travesties of justice, I think. The fact that this woman was found not guilty, this obviously guilty person. And then how do you live with yourself? Like, how do you...
She doesn't have a conscience. I mean, that's the only thing that I can figure.
Yeah.
For the first time on camera, Casey Anthony, the woman infamously accused and later acquitted of murdering her own daughter, Kaylee.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty. Casey's never told her story.
Is now addressing lingering questions more than a decade after that not guilty decision.
911, what's your emergency? My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
Including why it took a month to report Kaylee's disappearance and what happened on the last day she saw her daughter.
The only person in this world that matters to me still is my daughter. But I'm still defending the fact that I didn't hurt her.
In a 3-part limited...
Okay, what do you think about that fake emotion?
She took acting classes.
Yeah, it's better than most. Isn't it? I mean, it's better than the fake tears we saw from Susan Smith.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the quality of fake tears has improved as we move down the line in cases, for sure.
But I'm still defending the fact that I didn't hurt her.
In a 3-part limited series, Anthony blames her father, George, for the tragic death, alleging that he staged Kaylee's drowning in order to cover up that he might have been abusing his granddaughter. She tells Peacock, owned by NBC Universal, which also owns NBC News, that the day Kaylee disappeared, she actually fell asleep with the 2-year-old child in her arms, only to be awakened by her father, later holding the lifeless child. In the series, Casey says, she was soaking wet. I can see him standing there with her in his arms and hand her to me and telling me that it's my fault, that I did that I caused that. But he didn't rush to call 911 and he wasn't trying to resuscitate her. For 31 days, Anthony says she thought her daughter was alive and well while she's...
During those days, as you mentioned at the beginning, there's photos of her out partying, doing all the things she wanted to do without being the burden and the responsibility of being a parent, you know, at the club, drinking it up, just letting it all hang out.
Yeah.
Stayed with a boyfriend.
She was perfect.
But back in 2011, Anthony's defense team telling a different story, arguing in court that Kaylee was not killed, but drowned in the family pool.
So her story changed again. At trial, the daughter accidentally drowned and she knew that her dad had covered it up. And now she's saying, I don't even believe she drowned. I think my dad was abusing her and killed her and then pretended that she drowned.
Yep.
Wow.
Do you think they still have a relationship?
No. The Anthonys, the parents, refused to be interviewed for this series. They just want to be left alone.
That's so crazy. This woman just out there walking around. Okay. I haven't seen this yet, but I feel like I have to watch it now because if there's going to be all this footage of her just acting, I feel like I have to see it to see how good, because she seems to be a better actor than some of them.
Definitely.
Okay, guys, what do you think? We're at 2.5 hours.
Can we maybe do a part 2?
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm normally asleep by like 9:30, so I'm like,
I feel like this might be a good resting point, Mr. Chris. You tell me what you think if we do a part 2 at some point, because we've covered a lot of the women, and before we get into any of the men, it might be good to take a rest. What do you think?
Yeah, we got a lot, so might as well split into two.
Okay. Can I show you guys one other bonus one before we head out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Shayna Hubers?
The name is familiar, but I couldn't tell you any details.
She killed her boyfriend, called 911. I had the 911 call pulled up, but because we're short on time, I'm not going to play it. But in the 911 call, she gives way too many details. She also says, first thing she says, I killed my boyfriend in self-defense. Like she is immediately trying to provide a reason in the 911 call. And so this was from her interrogation. It reminded me of Jodi Arias.
And he had put his arm across the table and had it in my face and was screaming at me at the top of his lungs after he had thrown me around the room. And was saying emotionally to me, you're a f***ing hillbilly. I f***ing hate you. I hate everything about you for what you are and my family. He was screaming it, and he had his hand on the table, and he wasn't completely standing up. He was like this. He was sitting. He was enough that when I shot him, he went like this. Literally, that's when I knew he was dead, or close to it, and twitching. And I couldn't. I let him. I still, even though it hurt, I still, enough of me loved him. That I couldn't stand to watch him twitch. I knew he was going to die or have a completely deformed face. He's very vain. One of our last conversations we had that was good was that he wants my best friend who's a dentist to do his veneers and wants to get a nose job. Just that kind of person. And I'm
So she's saying he wanted a nose job and he's very vain.
sure. I gave him his nose job he wanted.
And then she laughs and says, I gave him the nose job he wanted.
Wow.
The reason she reminds me of Jodi Arias is when they get up, she talks and talks and talks like Jodi. And when they get up to leave, oh, this is funny. I didn't know they had Jodi Arias stuff cut in here. When they get up to leave, she starts singing. And dancing.
Amanda Knox did that too. She would not
Weird.
dance, but she turned cartwheels and stuff.
Oh, we're singing.
Whitney Houston impersonation.
She think they're gonna come in and go, hey, you're a pretty good singer. Your feet go.
Here's your water, crazy singing person. We just got a call from American Idol.
America's Best Killers.
Simon says you're a psycho bitch.
You've been discovered. That story is also crazy, and the story what happened after she was convicted gets crazier because then she hooks up with a trans woman, a man in prison who has decided to live as a woman. That guy's insane. You can watch stuff about his crimes. They decide they want to get married so she can get more news interviews. And there's all this footage of her talking about her so excited for her wedding, and then that falls apart. Anyway, her story continues on beyond. Like
make a lot of great choices.
Yeah, just psycho. And when she does her interviews about the getting married to the trans woman, she's also very concerned with her appearance, and she does a lot of the same Jodi Arias stuff of like trying to seduce the viewer, trying to seduce the interviewer. It's just, yeah. Shayna Hubers, that's her name. Okay. Well, thank you guys for hanging in here. I had a feeling we would go long, and I just appreciate you, especially you, Tracy, hanging out with us late. And I hope you'll come back when we decide to do a part 2 and 3 and 4 and 5.
Please have me back. I'd love to. I still want to talk about Lori Vallow on that next one. So, but
Yes.
we don't have the time tonight to get into it because that one would take about a half hour.
We've got to talk about Lori Vallow. We've got to let's do a little more. We can also do one specifically on the Slender Man and the child, like what's her name? Shalia Eddy. I had her on the list. The kids and teenagers who commit murder. But yeah, this is just once we started looking at all the clips, I was like, oh wow, we're trying to do a lot in one episode. But thank you guys for hanging out, and we didn't even get to funny stuff. Should we do one quick funny one, Mr. Chris?
Let's see which one. Let's pull up that Chris Rock one. So this isn't exactly true crime, but it's kinda. You'll see. This is from the Chris Rock show. He had a show on HBO, which is really funny. This is one of my favorite skits. So let's just watch maybe a minute of it.
Okay, we're gonna add with a bit of levity.
News from the Chris Rock News Center in New York. Here's Farai Chideya.
Violence has struck America again. I'm Farai Chideya. Perhaps the apocalypse is near and the agents of Armageddon are amongst us. Terror has left its perch in the back of our minds and taken roost on the doorstep of our lives. Just a short while ago, an unidentified man walked into a New York City building and began violently smacking people upside the head. We have a tape of the dramatic 911 call made just moments after the attack began.
I can't understand you. You're going to have to speak English. He's smacking everybody. Stay on the line.
The suspect in this attack is former building worker Gerald Lee Davis. Davis was recently dismissed from his position as the building's part-time second assistant doorman and had reportedly been despondent. Right now, we're going to show you exclusive footage of the initial moments of this attack. As you see here, Davis enters the building, and within seconds, the rampage begins.
All I see is Mike Harlow.
Details, we go to
Mike Harlow finally snapped
the scene.
All right, that's all you can.
Gerald Lee Davis walked into this building.
It's really funny. It's one of my favorite skits from the show.
It's so silly. It took me a
I
second
know.
to even figure out what's going on. I was
Yeah,
like,
so the thing is, Chris Rock show had a lot of writers from Conan O'Brien's show. Louis C.K. was one of the main writers. And Chris Rock, when he brought over those writers from Conan's show, he told them, don't write what you think black audiences want to see. Just write the same stuff you're writing for Conan, just as silly, absurd as it was. And that's what they did. And that's why we got the wonderful masterpiece, Pootie Tang, which Louis C.K. wrote, directed that film. But it started out on the Chris Rock show as a series of skits. And they're hilarious.
was that one of them?
Pootie Tang, yeah. Pootie Tang
No, I
was a
mean,
skit
but
on Chris Rock.
did it evolve from the smacker?
No, that's just
okay,
a separate. But yeah, he had a lot of silly skits like that on the show.
That was excellent. It's also funny how it's called CRTV. CRTV. There's got to be a pun there somewhere. I wanted to say thank you very much, Cheddar, if you're still around, for the 5 memberships you gifted tonight. And I forgot to say this at the beginning, but you can always support the show by becoming a member or going to our locals Patreon or Subscribestar or becoming a member here at YouTube. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, we're going to take off. I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. And thank you again, Tracy from Keto and Crime. You guys can go and check out her coverage more in depth of all the stories we talked about. You've covered all these, right?
All except we didn't get to the one that I haven't covered on the list. But yes, I've covered them. Most of them are multiple parters. My Lori Vallow coverage, because when we get to that one, because I've read all of Chad Daybell's books and everything, I've got over 100 videos on that case. So,
okay. That's going to be
that case built my channel.
That's going to be excellent when we get to that, because you know so much. It'll be excellent to have like those experts like, okay, what am I forgetting? What did I get wrong about this? I can't believe you've read that crazy guy's books.
I read, there was over 12 of them that I read.
Yeah. Wow. That case is just it will be great to have an expert on that one, because if you guys haven't looked into it, it is so convoluted, and there are so many crimes, so many murders that she was involved in, other than just
And
the
mysterious deaths
two.
that not
And
necessarily considered
yes,
murders,
yes,
financial crimes, and just the fact that they're both religious fanatics. Their interpretation of things and things, it's out there. It delves into cults, and that's the reason now I'm covering this 8 Passengers drama with Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrand, another Mormon case that's very, very similar.
The name sounds familiar.
There was no deaths involved, but they've both been arrested. One of them owned the YouTube channel 8 Passengers. It was a family vlogging channel, and they've been arrested for 3 counts of child abuse. Wow. Just some really, and if that had not happened, I believe those kids would have ended up just like Lori Vallow's kids.
Oh. Well,
A lot
thank
of
you.
craziness in Mormon country.
We certainly appreciate your knowledge and you lending us your time tonight. So thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
You guys have a good night, Mr. Chris.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.